it could get worse. Clearly, Keir Starmer is in great trouble. The jackals are circling and his advisers are getting it in the neck, and we may see one or two of them go. This has a great historic tradition behind it, that it's always been the case that the king can do no wrong and therefore blame the advisers, the evil counsellors around the principal who are leading him astray. And being a leading adviser has never been a particularly good position when things get a little bit difficult. And you can see this throughout history. You can go back, if you want, to Sejanus, who was the advisor to Tiberius, who Tiberius then demotes and has executed. You can see it with Thomas Wentworth, the advisor to Charles I, who had his head cut off when the king was no longer able to protect him, the king's evil advisor who was stirring things up and potentially getting an army to fight against Parliament. You can see it with Clarendon, Edward Hyde, the close advisor of Charles II, who was forced out of office. On and on it rolls. You saw it more recently with Tony Blair, who had ultimately to get rid of Alistair Campbell because of all that went on with Iraq. You have this wonderful, unassailable principle, and you blame the advisers. This is partly, of course, out of cowardice, because blaming the advisers is safe, because you're still ostensibly being loyal to the principle. So no one can say that you're a traitor. Instead, you can say, I'm absolutely loyal to my principle, but his evil advisers had led him astray. And so McSweeney is now the evil advisor in the firing line, and we'll see how long he lasts. Today's newspapers think it may not be that long. So, what happens next? Who are the runners and riders in the frame at the moment? Very much Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting, formidably able politician, handling things extremely well, professing loyalty, whilst no doubt building up support among the backbenches of Labour MPs, making those calls, having those meetings, not meetings in smoke-filled rooms anymore, but you know the type of thing that I'm talking about. That will have been going on a long time. It's the commonplace of politics. It's not formally a leadership campaign. It's just building up friendships, rebuilding old ones, making sure that people feel well treated, speaking in other people's constituencies, all the things that curry a little bit of favour. And he'll be doing all of that. But he's also got the big challenge of reforming the National Health Service. And when he came into office, a lot was promised. He was going to be quite a radical reformer. People were worried that he was too right-wing and that he was moving in a potentially conservative direction in the reforms he was advocating. And he certainly was brave as the shadow health spokesman and opened up a discussion on reform in the NHS. And he's still saying things that aren't necessarily that popular with the left. On the other hand, the NHS hasn't got any better. NHS England seems to be years away from being abolished, that big announcement made earlier this year. So yes, he's a capable politician, but he hasn't managed to prove himself in terms of the administrative job that he has got. And the risk for him is that he's seen as being too right-wing. He's not on the left of the party, essentially a Blairite, and the heart of the party is probably to the left of Keir Starmer. Bear in mind, Starmer had to move heavily to the left to pretend he was the heir to Corbyn to win the leadership. So, although man of ability, I think it's going to be quite hard for Wes Streeting to get it. Who else is there? Well, there's Andy Burnham. The problem with Andy Burnham is A, that he flopped at the Labour Party conference at Liverpool, and B, he's not in the House of Commons. Now, this is interesting because there is no law that says the Prime Minister has to be in the House of Commons. Indeed, it was only when Curzon didn't become Prime Minister in the 1920s that it became clear that the Prime Minister shouldn't be in the House of Lords. But that is merely a convention. It is not the law of the land. Nonetheless, the idea that the Prime Minister should be held accountable in the House of Commons is very strong, and therefore Burnham has to try to win a seat. That requires two things. One is a Labour MP who's willing to make way for him. on the chance that he may become leader, because it can't be guaranteed, and secondly, that the people will vote for him. And at the moment, I wouldn't take on a by-election for the Labour Party. It doesn't look to be a career-enhancing prospect. And if Burnham were to lose a by-election, his political career would be finished. So Burnham faces considerable difficulties. Then there's the former deputy leader, Angela Rayner. Angela Rayner, one of the most charismatic figures in the Labour movement. Angela Rayner's promotion would be a bit like Zach Polanski or indeed Nigel Farage. You'd be going for the most charismatic option, but also the most high-risk option. High risk partly because of what recently happened to her over stamp duty, but also what she might do. She says things, she's forward in what she thinks, she doesn't hold back. Sometimes that isn't the best strategy for a Prime Minister. And of course, she's the architect of the Workers' Rights Bill, which is an absolute disaster economically. So in terms of would it get worse, under Angela it would be a shift to the left. But I wouldn't rule her out as a serious candidate because she does have charisma. She has a connection. She seems to be fun. Think back to when she did Prime Minister's Questions against Boris Johnson. She was really good at it. There is an excitement to her that means that people might be tempted to put her in the top position. But it would be a worse government from the point of view of people like me, from Conservatives. It would be a hard left government. It would give no quarter to the wealth creators of this country. Who else is there? Well, there's Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary. Very interesting political figure. Seems again, like Wes Streeting, to be on the right of the party. Seems to want to be tough on migration. Isn't being successful at it so far. Things, if anything, are getting worse. The deal with the French hasn't worked. The French are stopping fewer people coming over than they were before the deal was upgraded. The Home Office is a difficult department to run. It's been the graveyard of ambitious ministers for many years now, but she hasn't been there long enough for it to damage her reputation, which is important. But again, I think being seen to be on the right of the party makes it hard for her to win, even though many of the things she says I'm sympathetic to. I was particularly impressed that she imposed the death bill, the assisted suicide bill. I thought that showed courage and moral strength, as of course did Wes Streeting. So both of them deserve credit for that from my point of view. But I'm not who's going to be voting in this context. It is Labour members who will be voting, and they may be less sympathetic to that than I am. There is, of course, Ed Miliband. Now, Ed Miliband led the Labour Party before, as you will remember, always seems to top the poll on Labour list. Which cabinet minister do they like? They like Ed Miliband. And that's understandable, for he is a very likeable individual. I think he is a very decent man. But oh my goodness, he's left-wing. But green policy would be fanatical. We would be cold and we would be poor. But I think he has quite a good chance because the membership of the Labour Party is of the left. It's not Blairite. It's not of the right-wing-ish Labour Party, blue Labour types. It is of the left. It elected Corbyn, of course, twice. And I can see the attraction from their point of view of Miliband, that he could reunite the left. He couldn't appeal to Nigel Farage's voters, but he could appeal to those who are going to the Greens or the Lib Dems or to Jeremy Corbyn. He could begin the reuniting of the left, which is important to hold Labour seats. And his popularity with members means that MPs may rally to his cause thinking that's the best way to get a job. People want to support a winner early, and this was clear when Boris Johnson became leader of the Conservative Party. Lots of people who weren't that sympathetic to him supported him because they knew he was going to win with the members. I just wonder whether Ed Miliband may not be in that position. There are then the outsiders. There's always the possibility of an upset in leadership elections. You could get Lucy Powell, or you could get David Lammy, heaven help us. But broadly, I think it's likely to be worse than Keir Starmer rather than better, more left-wing, more focused in doing its left-wing things, and potentially slightly more popular with voters, particularly if it's Miliband reuniting the left. So it could get worse. And then there's the question of a general election, which has been mentioned front page Daily Mail today. I did a piece on this a couple of months ago, which you can see here, but this is important. As I was saying about a Prime Minister not having to be in the House of Commons by law, there doesn't have to be a general election by law. But I think our Constitution is evolving. And in the same way as the Prime Minister cannot be in the House of Lords anymore, so a new Prime Minister is well advised to have a new election. Without that mandate, it is very hard to get things done, as Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak found. It's very hard to persuade your members to back you because nobody's voted for the policies that you're trying to implement. You get drift in government, you get weakness in government, but you also get an irritated electorate. I know this is hard for us to believe, but in July 2024, the country voted for Keir Starmer. They didn't vote for individual Labour MPs who they've never heard of, who are some of them not even household names in their own households. They voted for the party and the leader of the party. Changing him is an offence to the electorate. It's dismissive, it's condescending to democracy, assuming that MPs are above it and are senior to it. And voters don't like that, as they didn't like the removal of Boris Johnson. So they'd be well advised to have a general election. And it's interesting that lots of people who, when I've said this before, have poo-pooed what I've said, now are saying it must happen because they're friends of Keir Starmer's. I think that's the way the Constitution is evolving, but it hasn't got there yet. So my guess is they will avoid an election like the plague, and the individual candidates will promise their supporters they won't have an election because they look as if they would lose it. And that is going to undermine any new government, make it harder for it to do things, and is another reason it will be worse because it won't have authority. And actually, in this country, we need governments that can govern. So what I'm really saying is always keep hold of nerves for fear of finding something worse. Yes, I think Starmer's in terminal trouble. I don't see how he survives for 12 months, possibly an even shorter time. His advisors go first and then he's under attack. But I don't think this will make things better, because unless we have a new election, unless we have a new government altogether, the people likely to be leading this country are going to be as bad, if not worse, than Keir Starmer. As always, thank you very much for listening.